Going over to the Cultural Part podcast, you have Matt Walsh on tipping culture going viral yet again. This is perhaps one of the top things he's talking about, and spoiler, he's 110% right. Again, this credit to Matt Walsh on his YouTube channel or Daily Show.
Because that's what the tip prompt is really asking. Here's your total. Would you like to make it more expensive? No, I would not like that. No, thank you. For the last few years on this show, we have been covering what I would call the pandemic of pointless tipping. Now, it used to be that tipping was expected only if you were at a sit-down restaurant or ordering a pizza for delivery. It's a simple time back then. Everybody knew the rules and expectations. You were asked to leave a tip only in very limited and specific circumstances, which meant that you could tip generously when those occasions arose. It was a win-win. The waiters and pizza delivery guys, they made out pretty well, and you had the opportunity to feel magnanimous. I used to tip up.
Which, ADHD, that's a great Scrabble word. Or bananagrams if you like the updated version.
Upwards of 25%, even more for most tipping situations. I was essentially a philanthropist back in those days. But then the dam started to crack a little bit, and suddenly places like coffee shops were putting out tip jars. And, why do I need to tip someone for pouring me a coffee? I could do that by myself. I'm more than happy to. Let me behind the counter. I'll handle it.
They would never, come on, Matt. Starbucks would never hire you. Your hair is not short and blue, and you don't have a cow ring. You just look out of place. And you have flannel. They have, very bright color uniforms over at the Starbucks and other coffee locations.
Nobody ever bothered to justify the coffee shop tip jar, and we didn't have time to stop and think about it because next thing you know, sit-down restaurants started offering to-go options, but they still wanted tips even for that. We used to tip the waiter for serving the food. Now we're being asked to tip the guy who simply hands a bag of food across the counter, and we got to tip the same for that, we're told. Tipping had already gotten out of hand, and we hadn't seen the worst of it yet because
to clarify that, you're not just tipping the waiter. Spoiler alert, many instances in the service industry, they're actually dividing that up, between the chef, the busboys. It's not all going to the waiter or waitress.
One day, seemingly out of nowhere, all at once,
pandemic,
every store in America started using touchscreen tablets at checkout, which makes it even easier to add a tipping option. And this was the moment when the dam finally gave way. The simple, innocent days of tipping only on pizza night or date night were gone, and now everybody wants a tip. Every cashier at every store suddenly turns into a panhandler. Doesn't matter if you're at a bakery or a coffee shop or a fast food place or an airport or a supermarket or a gas station, a hardware store. They all want tips. They've all decided that inflation hasn't made life expensive enough as it is, apparently. And even as these industries intentionally make their already too expensive goods and services even more expensive, the quality of the goods and services declined. The website retailcustomerexperience.com reported last year on a poll of over 96,000 consumers, which found that the quality of customer service has dipped dramatically. So if you've noticed a significant increase in the number of customer service workers who are totally disinterested and generally incompetent and often openly angry at you for walking into their establishment to begin with, that's not your imagination. We've all noticed the same thing. And yet, at this precise moment, when service has never been worse, we're being asked to pay more than we ever have for it.
True.
But at least if you're tipping a, sullen and lazy customer service employee, you're still tipping an actual employee. You're tipping someone. You're tipping a human being. Increasingly, even that is starting to change. The Wall Street Journal reports this week, quote, tipping at self-checkout has customers crying emotional blackmail. Zero interaction with employees during a transaction no longer guarantees freedom from the moral quandary of how much to tip. Prompts to leave 20% at self-checkout machines at airports, stadiums, cookie shops, cafes across the country are rankling consumers already inundated by the proliferation of tip screens. Business owners say the automated queues can significantly increase gratuities and boost staff pay. But the unmanned prompts are leading more customers to question what exactly the tips are for. They're cutting labor costs by doing self-checkout, but what's the point of asking for a tip? And where is it going? Says Ishita Jamar, a senior at American University in Washington, D.C., who has noticed more self-serve tip queues at restaurants she frequents. Tipping researchers, that's a job apparently, tipping researchers, and labor advocates say that so-called tip creep is a way for employers to put the onus for employee pay onto consumers rather than raising wages themselves. Companies say that tips are an optional thanks for a job well done. Job well done? Well, who did the job at a self-checkout machine? Me? If anyone should be tipped after I use self-checkout, it should be me. And I really should get a tip because I'm very efficient on the self-checkout, okay? Unlike a lot of people and they're in front of you self-checkout, you know that's going to be a problem because you're going to be there. They bag each thing slowly and individually and all that. I speed through that thing. It's one of my best skills. And I've already taken on the role of the employee when I'm at the self-checkout machine. I am scanning and bagging my own items. So the store should be tipping me for my labor, not the other way around. Self-checkout has always been kind of a time of internal emotional conflict for me because on the one hand, I appreciate how self-checkout caters to my antisocial tendencies. So I like that. I don't have to talk to anybody. That's great.
I mean, that is a big upside of self-checkout, especially at the Walmart. However, what I like is you can do it a lot faster, more efficient than the average, cashier. And also, I don't know why I'm so paranoid about this. It maybe only happened 5 times like earlier in my life, but like I swear, some cashiers and register workers almost delight at taking your produce and slamming it into the bag, as if it was somehow going to magically not make it into that plastic bag that's wide open right there. You just take those bananas and bam, right in there. And a disproportionate amount of time, your produce to be bruised to the point where you barely eat the dang thing. So to me, it's like I want to have that self-checkout, like make sure the produce isn't damaged beyond repair. To me, that's one of the biggest upsides to having self-checkout. Now, in terms of the actual, amount of work that you're doing, I would argue majority of the time, at restaurants, it's not really an instance where you're doing more than just, you're not bagging it. It's already bagged when you're there. But my biggest pet peeve is you're at the restaurant and there's a very famous, I was going to say, is it Torchy's Tacos? There's a couple places my team loves to go, and we'll go there because they like it. And they got pretty good tacos, definitely not a paid endorsement or anything like that. But it's the instance where you have to pay before you get the product or service, which I find viscerally disgusting. That is ridiculous. Because again, you're taking the gamble. You have no idea if you're going to be good or bad. That kind of aligns with what Matt is saying in terms of it's disconnecting to the actual quality of service you're getting. In this case, you have to guess, and they believe they start at 18% at the tablet that users are there. It goes to, I think, 18, 20, 25, all the way to whatever you want. So to me, it's also about not just the proliferation, how many times we have these tipping iPads everywhere, but also you should never have to tip before you get the product or service. You're basically gambling. And especially annoying because more often than not, that's your only option. And if you wait, and again, I've had some great waitresses, I've had good and bad experiences like everyone else. And there's nothing more annoying. And again, it's a company credit card. So it's one of those things, it's not personally coming out of my pocket, but still the company. And there's nothing more annoying than, again, you get the tacos, you put 25% tip, and it takes forever for them to get the food to you. The order is wrong. And in some cases, not all, Matt does have a point about them having not the best attitude. Again, we all have bad days. I take that into consideration when I'm tipping at the, sometimes. But you gave them 25% in this scenario for terrible service. So there's in these cases, no incentive for them to actually do great work because they already got paid. So it's just ridiculous. Now, when you had a sit-down restaurant, it's a nice, 4 or 5 star, however the Michelin man rates these things these days. Most traditional sit-down restaurants, you tip because you pay at the end. That makes sense. You've had the product and service delivered to you. You've had the whole interaction with the waitress or the waiter. You can see them going above and beyond. And now, again, my anecdotal experience when I'm usually eating out, I'm pretty darn frugal myself. So unless it's Walmart groceries, I'm not eating it unless I'm with a customer. Then, go to a restaurant for my tech company. And because we usually go to higher end restaurants, the service, I would argue, is a little bit better than general. So in the past couple of years, we've had exceptional service at those restaurants, establishments, and I tip appropriately. Usually, 20 to 30%, just depending on, how they treated us, how giant. Again, something I really appreciate about some excellent service and some that are really good at reading body languages. It's an instance of when do they come towards you and interrupt the conversation. That is an exceptional skill set. And I tip 30% plus when they have the perfect timing and not just delivering the food, but they can tell if you're having a conversation with a client or you're with a customer, or prospective client, or whoever you're with, you can kind of tell, by the way they're sitting, where they're turned. A good waiter can tell when is a good time to interrupt the conversation to ask, hey, could I give you a refill? How does that taste? Should I get you something else? And there's nothing more annoying than when they have bad timing and you're right in the middle of a conversation talking about a project or something like that, and they interrupt and they kill the conversation. Or you're just, getting to know them, talking about their favorite hobby. You're both really, really into the conversation. You have a great time talking about maybe going to the track, modifying your car, boring out an engine, get some more horsepower. And then they interrupt awkwardly and diffuse the situation, which I try not to critique too much because, shoot, I am awkward as hell. That's also why I'm not a waiter. But, and again, even then, I still tip appropriately. But to me, it's all about the timing of when you're getting that service. Now, Matt's right. We've had a proliferation of these iPads everywhere. I'm actually surprised, as far as I can tell, or last time I checked, my dentist doesn't do this yet, although I joke that he should because he does such a great job and he took care of me during the hard times. So I almost want to overpay him for taking care of him when things got better. But yeah, I think the tipping fatigue is real. The coffee shop, yeah, that's one of those things where a couple bucks, now, I would argue, depends on the complexity of the order. I am pretty darn frugal and simple. If I go to the Starbucks, in the rare instances, I'm only willing to pay for it because I have time between customer meetings. I need basically a mobile office. I just bring my laptop and a hotspot and do a little work. So I'll go there, and just the way I was raised, if you go to any business establishment, even if you're just using the restroom, you always buy something from them because, again, you're using the resources. So it's just, I think, the right thing to do morally. And the coffee shop, if it's a pretty simple order, like to me, I'm just getting the cheapest black coffee. I think they call it Pike's Place, although I don't think they put Pike's fish into the coffee, though sometimes it does taste that bad. But I just get the cheap black coffee. In that case, I think it might be $5-7, which is ridiculous, but paying for the atmosphere and I would argue, basically the mobile office, I'll still do like 15-20%. But I could also see if someone just wants to give like $1 or $2 tip on that, because again, that is just them putting hot coffee through beans. They're fancier beans. Starbucks has a great supply chain and great relationships with those vendors, but it's fancy beans. Now, the average Starbucks order, I think is appropriate to give maybe, I don't know, maybe 25%. If it's the most complex pain in their order, you could argue that's their job and that's why Starbucks exists, because their profit margins from the very expensive foods. I can also understand that Starbucks pays well above minimum wage. That's something to take into consideration. A lot of jobs, the waiters, waitresses, they make below minimum wage because they're on a tip contract, or they have an instance in which they're expected to make more money on the tips. They may or may not report them, but it's an instance where, legally speaking, they're paid under minimum wage because they're tipped, and the tips, legally has to be more than minimum wage at the end of the year. So that's another thing. Starbucks, they're getting paid 15 plus an hour. They're getting dental. Long term, they get stock options. Starbucks treats their employees great. It's asinine that the unions want even more, but nevertheless, that's also something to take into consideration. What kind of environment are they tipping? Is it a place where the person genuinely does get paid below minimum wage because it's a tipping job, traditionally speaking, and it's built into compensation structure? That's also something to take into consideration. I don't think the average person does. There are a lot of businesses paying people well above minimum wage, and they're still asking for tips. And that's another thing where it's like, what are your feelings on that? So it's gotten pretty complex, and I think it's good actually that Trump has a big beautiful bill passed. So there's not going to be a tax on tips. Granted, there's a lot of nuances in that statement with the way that actually got signed off. But again, I still think that's going to be a good thing, and I don't think you should be taxed for tips. I'm not a fan of any income tax personally, so hopefully they repeal it someday so we don't have the government stealing so much from us. But yeah, I think overall, tipping culture is getting out of hand. And again, I think the biggest issue is we need to put our foot down and say, I'm not giving a tip until I get the product or service. But let me know your thoughts. I think Matt mostly gets it right, but let me know your thoughts, because as always, be fascinated to hear what you have to say. Thank you, everyone, for taking time to tune in today. Again, trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the month, so click that button. I greatly appreciate it. Also, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or comment. It's a great way to give me additional feedback, letting me know how I can make the show better and better. Lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.